Hi everybody, good morning. It's me Omar Al grade 8 teacher. Welcome back to my lovely subject literature again. I hope you guys stay well and doing well in these days off. Today I'll be giving you the second comprehension passage. It is the second unseen passage. It is about waiting out detention by Barbara D. Krasner. Before we get started talking about the passage, analyzing it, answering the questions, let me just ask you a very small question about the word detention here. What does it mean? Have you ever been detained or kept in as if you are questioned in a police station or in the school? Have you ever been taken or kept in the detention room in the school? If you answer yes, then you know the meaning of the word detention. If not, it's your chance to understand what does it mean. We know that if a student misbehaves in the school, he might be taken to the detention room. So you can tell from what I have said the meaning of the word detention. So what does it mean? Simply, detention means to be detained or kept in a custody as if you are questioned. Okay, before analyzing the text, let me just here read the first 4 lines. And as I told you before, we're not going to read the whole passage word by word, line by line. We're going to just skim and scan to figure out the answers of the question. We're going to just follow up this reading comprehension strategy. It saves your time and your efforts. Okay, let me just now read. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, vast numbers of Europeans immigrated to the United States. Most of them came through New York City, and beginning in 1892, were processed at the Federal Immigration Center on Ellis Island in New York Harbor. This passage is from a magazine article about conditions there. Question: what is the central idea of this passage, or what is the idea of this passage? What do you think? You can tell from these 4 lines. Simply, you could say that the central idea or the main idea is to explain the life conditions to people who immigrated to the United States. So here, the author is going to give us some pieces of info about life conditions and how life conditions looked like to those people who immigrated to the United States. This, in one way or another, leads to another question, to a bigger question. What is the author's purpose here? Also, you can tell the author's purpose from these 4 lines. What is the author's goal? Why did the author write this article? Simply, as long as the central idea of this passage is to explain the life conditions to people who immigrated to the United States. So here, the author is going to give us what? Information, pieces of information. So here, the author's purpose is to inform, to give more information and details about what? About the life conditions to those people who immigrated to the United States. Is that clear? Now, let's go to the questions. Let's go to the questions below. Read each question and its alternatives. Then we will go back to the text and skimming, scanning, figuring out the answer. Okay. Now let's go to Part A. Based on the information in the passage from waiting out detention, Which of the following statements would be best to include in an objective summary of the passage? Let's now read the alternatives. Frederick C. Hall reduced the number of immigrants detained on Ellis Island and the length of their detention. Frederick C. Hall felt that entertaining the detainees at Ellis Island was more important than educating them. Frederick C. Hall was sympathetic to the detainees and worked to improve the way they were treated during detention. Frederick C. Hall was the first commissioner to understand the importance of giving the detainees fresh air and exercise. Here you have the text. You can skim and find the answer. I'll give you just a very, a small hint here. You can go to paragraph 4. Try to skim this paragraph within 20 seconds and you can figure out the answer. Okay. Look here to the last sentence. It was, he believed, time for them to be treated like humans and not just as numbers. Look to this underlining sentence. What do you understand here? What can you conclude from this sentence? When Frederick C. said, or when the author said, Frederick believed time for them to be treated like humans and not just as numbers. Simply, you could say that it represents how sympathetic was Frederick with immigrants and how he worked to improve the way they were treated during their detention when they were coming to the United States. Okay, so we can go to the question right now. Here, what do you think? Which alternative is the best answer here? Simply, you could say that number C, because we said previously, okay, when we underlining the sentences, okay, we said this sentence in one way or another represents how Frederick was sympathetic, okay, to the immigrants who came to the United States during the detention or during their detention, and how he worked to improve the way they were treated during their detention. Okay, so here the best answer is C. Let's now go to exercise or question number B, part B. Which sentence from the passage best supports the answer to part A? In other words, as if he wants to say, cite textual evidence to support your answer. Quote a sentence from the passage that supports your answer, that shows, that proves that Frederick C. Hall was sympathetic to the detainees and worked to improve the way they were treated during the detention. Okay, let's go to the text itself. Here you go. Paragraph number 4. Simply, this is the sentence that we identified, yeah? Okay. Now this sentence, as we said, represents what? The Frederick sympathy towards immigrants and his efforts to improve their way or the way they were treated during their detention. So this sentence in one way or another represents, or let's say here supports, shows that Frederick was sympathetic to the immigrants and worked hard to improve the way they were treated during that detention. So here, this sentence supports the answer in question A. Let's now move to the question itself. Read the alternatives and choose the best answer. During the day, if the detainees wanted to get fresh air and exercise, they were permitted on the roofs of the main building and baggage and dormitory building. Paragraph 3. It was, he believed, time for them to be treated like humans, not just numbers. Paragraph 4. So here the answer would be the second choice, which is B. Because this sentence we already identified it in paragraph 4, and we said it represents the Frederick's sympathy. Frederick's sympathy. So here let's go down to part C. Based on the information in the passage, what conclusion can most clearly be drawn about the way immigrants were received by the general population in the United States in the late 19th and early 20th century? In other words, let me just explain it in other words. How the new arrivals were treated by their homeland immigrants who already settled in the United States. A. Most Americans welcomed immigrants warmly. Most Americans resented the presence of immigrants. The immigrants' poor knowledge of American culture made them easy prey for crooks and con artists. Immigrants already settled in the United States took an interest in those from their homelands who were new arrivals. Let's now see. Have a look at the passage and try to find out the answer. A very small hint. Go to paragraph 6. Try to skim it within less than 20 seconds. You could find the answer. Let's now underline it together. Previously kept apart, men and women finally were permitted to sit together in the detainment area. Adults also could meet in specially assigned rooms for educational classes. If you look to this paragraph, to these two lines, what can you infer? What inference can you make here? Simply, you could say that the new arrivals were treated in a good way by the homelands who already settled in the United States. So here, if you go to question number C, you could say that the answer is D. Why? Let's now read it. Immigrants already settled in the United States took an interest in those from their homelands who were new arrivals. When we identified the two lines in paragraph 6, we said these two lines, in one way or another, represents that immigrants who already settled in the United States took care of the new arrivals or took an interest in those from their homelands who were new arrivals. So here the best answer is D. Let's now go to part D. Which sentence or sentences from the passage best support the answer to part C? As if he wants to say here, Cite textual evidence to support your answer. So the main skill, the core skill in these two passages is to cite textual pieces of evidence. And I hope you got my point, how to cite textual evidence, how to go to the text to quote the sentence that supports your answer. It's really important. It's really, really, really important. Yeah. So if you cite a textual evidence, for me, this means that you perfectly understand what you have read. You perfectly understand, okay, the lesson and understand what you have read. Okay. So here, let's now read the alternatives. The rules to enter the United States were numerous and rigid. Paragraph 1. Previously kept apart, men and women finally were permitted to sit together in the detainment area. Adults also could meet in specially assigned rooms for educational classes. Paragraph 6. On Sundays, different immigrant groups gave concerts. For example, on Italian Day, the Italian American community in New York arranged to have the famous tenor Enrico Caruso come out to Ellis Island and perform. Paragraph 7. Around 4 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, they hustled us out into a courtyard where there were chairs set up. They wanted to entertain us with a vaudeville show. We watched magicians, tricks, comic acts, singing, most of which we didn't understand. Paragraph 8. Let's now go to the text itself and skim the answer. Try to skim and figure out the answer. Okay. Let me just give you a very small hint. I want you to go to paragraph 6 again. Let's now read it together. Previously kept apart, men and women finally were permitted to sit together in the detainment area. Adults also could meet in specially assigned rooms for educational classes. We said previously, these two lines, in one way or another, represent that the immigrants who already immigrated to the United States took care or took an interest, okay, on those from their homelands, the new arrivals. So these two lines, in one way or another, support the answer of part C, which says immigrants already settled in the United States took an interest in those from their homelands who were new arrivals. Okay? So let's now go to question number D and identify the best, answer. Just have a look to the alternatives and let's together identify the best answer. What do you think, guys? It's very easy, and okay, if you read these 4 alternatives as quick as possible, you could figure out here the answer is B. Did you remember when I gave you a hint and I said go to paragraph 6 and read it? And when we read the 2 lines in paragraph 6, we said those 2 lines in one way or another represent how the immigrants who already immigrated to the United States took care or took an interest on those from their homelands who were new arrivals. Okay? So this is the answer that supports the let's say here the answer in part C. Now let's go to the last question, which is part E. Both the passage from the promised land and the passage from waiting out detention explore the topic of immigration to the United States. So here the two passages have the same, let's say here, topic. They are exploring the immigration to the United States during the late 18th century and early 19th century. Okay? Here the question says, which central idea does the information in the passages most clearly support? Okay. Since these two passages have something in common, they are talking about the immigration to the United States. And we figured out the central idea in the second paragraph, and we said the main idea is the life conditions to people who immigrated to the United States and how the life conditions looked like. Okay? Let's now read the alternatives and figure out, okay, the best answer. Some people came to the United States for political reasons, others for economic reasons. B. The path to immigration was long and difficult, involving harsh conditions at sea and long periods of detainment at Ellis Island. The people waiting back at home to come to the United States sometimes experienced harsher conditions than those being detained on Ellis Island. Those who came to the United States from the Russian Empire usually received much more help from immigrants groups than those who came from Italy. So here we have two things, okay? We have B and C actually, but the best answer is C, by the way. Why? Because we said that people who immigrated to the United States experienced harsher conditions and their life were very miserable and they were treated in a very, very, very bad way and they were detained for weeks and months, okay, before they entered to the United States. So simply we could say that they were experienced harsher conditions than those being detained on Ellis Island. Okay, but if you go to B, here it talks about the conditions, but the harsh conditions at sea and long periods. And we know that the text do not talk about the harsh conditions at sea and long periods. The two texts or the two passages talk about the harsh conditions that people who immigrated to the United States, or let's say here, the harsh conditions that people who immigrated to the United States, okay, experienced, and how they were treated when they have, let's say here, a detention, or when they were during their detention period, before they came into the United States or before they entered the United States. Okay, that is all about our lesson today. Thank you so much for your nice listening and for your time and effort. Guys, I'm so sorry. Actually I'm sick and actually my voice is not, clear. I know that. It's not, let's say here, obvious. So anyways, thank you so much for your nice listening and for your efforts. Keep up the best work. Try to read these two unseen passages and try to follow up this new reading comprehension strategy. It's very beneficial actually. You need this actually strategy when you have like here the unseen passage or when you have a test, because Okay, it saves a lot of time and it saves, okay, your efforts. So no need to go through the text. No need to go through the text word by word or line by line, because that, will take much time, and it's like a wasting, of time and efforts. So all what you want to do here is just to focus on how you could skim and how you could scan. These two strategies are really important. Yes, keep them in your mind. Try to practice, because as I told you previously, the more you practice, the more you master. Thank you so much again and again, and see you later.